Hello everyone, my name is Balázs Fürjes and I am the Director of EIT Health InnoStars. I invite you to a series of inspirational podcasts where we will speak with leaders, mentors and our partners. Their insights and experience are meant to encourage new generations of creative and innovation-driven researchers and entrepreneurs from Central, Eastern and Southern Europe to come up with new solutions dealing with 21st century health-related challenges. Did you know that in 2018, 1 in 5 men was diagnosed with prostate cancer? Currently, the PSA test is used as a biomarker of the disease, but it has low sensitivity and specificity, increased risk of false positives, and it cannot differentiate between benign and aggressive cancer. The Stockholm 3 test, on the other hand, is a blood test that can predict the risk of aggressive disease and lower the risk of unnecessary biopsies by 50%. It is a joint effort between the Karolinska Institute, Thermo Fisher Scientific and SynLab. In this first episode, Daniela Diaz-Santos talks to Martin Steinberg, Stockholm 3 project leader at Karolinska Institute, and Per Mattsson, CTO at Fadia Thermo Fisher Scientific. Both are EIT Health partners. They tell us how to involve partners in an innovative project.
Stockholm 3 is one of the most successful projects that we have at this date, and so you guys are my first group of interviewees.
My name is Martin Steinberg. I have a background in business. I actually worked in private equity before I started up my own company together with my identical twin brothers. So we've been working together since 2004 or 5 or something like that. So for a long time now. And we wanted to do, I wanted to get more, my hands dirty in real projects instead of just financing projects. And previously, obviously, I had a background as a management consultant and also in a bigger organization. We ended up working with a lot of researchers at the KI Karolinska Institute. So that's how this started. And we have worked a lot. I have a lot of experience working in, let's say, the interface between academic research and industry. It's not always so easy, but that's really in a way what EIT is about, because you want to take different legal entities that have slightly different objectives, right? And get them to work together. So that's why for me it's quite natural to move to the next step, where you have academic organizations, because you need that for what we're doing. You have big companies, because without the big companies you're not going to reach the market, and you have spin-out companies, startups. So that's the combination, that's the mix then where we work. And if I've been doing this for some time, because the idea for Stockholm 3, that's Henrik Grönberg, who is a professor at Karolinska Institute, that he came up with this idea in 2011 for Stockholm 3. And he said, you know what? Because there are many academics. Okay, so there are many academics who have come to us, well, look at my fantastic molecule. Isn't it beautiful? And you can look at them and say, you know what? It's a long way to go. But here Henrik came and said, you know what? I have this idea. We put a number of fairly well-known markers, protein markers, genetic markers, and some clinical markers. We put them together, and we should get the better test. And we said, that's great. Let's see if we can get you some funding for that. And we fixed the funding from the Stockholm County, a lot of money. And we did this big, really pivotal study, the Stockholm 3 study, with nearly 60,000 men. So that was a big step, because we could decide, should we go this alone, or should we have a technical partner for the platform? And we went to Fadia, which then became Thermo Fisher. And they had a technical platform for multiplexing. So we started working with them. We did a study in 2012 to 2014, in 2 years, 60,000 men. And then we had a first so-called lab-developed test set up in 2016 with the Karolinska University Hospital.
your relationship with Hendrik. How did it start?
Yeah, so I've been running around at Karolinska Institutet then since 2004, 2005, and I've gotten to know some of the leading. Actually, what we've done in a way is we've done a screening of the best researchers at Karolinska. There are many professors, but there are only a few really good ones, and Henrik happens to be one of those. And we started to work together in 2007. So you're going to have a lot of trust with each other when you start a journey like this. So it was a 4-year journey for us to get to the situation when he said, I have this idea, can you help me?
So he already, at the time, he already had some data on his own, or was this like a still a research project, research idea, or he already had some markers that he tested before?
He had built up, Henrik had already built up, by the way, with our help, but Henrik had already built up a fantastic biobank source, data source, registry sources and stuff like that. So he had already then a unique knowledge of what could work. But then he was extremely marker agnostic. And that's one thing we liked. Because he said, you know what? A number of markers together with an algorithm should make the trick instead of just going for one. I don't care which ones. But I do want markers that are already out there, not to develop new ones, because that takes years.
Yeah.
We're very proud that we were able to run a study with nearly 60,000 men in Sweden, in Stockholm, in 2 years. But we totally choked the system because we were using the ordinary system in Stockholm. So at some point we got a photo from the laboratory where they were doing the biopsies, and they were showing us a big number, they were showing us a table, I think, with biopsies that had not been analyzed. And there were hundreds of them, thousands of them, because they felt like they were overwhelmed. They didn't know what to do with all this. So that's just one example. And then we had to find another source of analysis of the biopsies. And we were, it wasn't me, it was my twin brother. He spent a weekend calling people all around in Sweden. He was quite sweaty that weekend because he needed to find somebody who were willing to do with a high quality our biopsies. That's just one example. And then they found one up in northern Sweden, where, by the way, did it with a fantastic quality. And then when we solved that, there was something else that came up. So there's always been problems. That's just from the study. And I can go on. When we had this lab developed test set up with the Karolinska University laboratory, and the clinicians started to want the test in Sweden. Well, it turned out that Karolinska University Hospital, they were not able to gear up for several reasons. So we had to set up our own company. That wasn't the idea from the beginning. We had to invest in a lot of equipment and stuff. So you hear, this has not been a straight road.
Thermo Fisher, what did you bring to the table?
Thermo Fisher brought then technology on how to measure things and how to analyze things and how to develop something into a product, into a possibility to spread this around the world. So we had been working about let's say about 5 years before we applied for EIT funding, or 4 years before we applied for EIT funding. And what is also important with EIT funding is that it should be in the late stage. It should be in the process of moving it into usage and not in the early research and development phases. Okay. So it should be projects that are almost done, but it's still a lot to do. For instance, how should something like this be used in different countries? How should it be reimbursed? Does it have the value that the original investigators have claimed?
All of this sounds like the perfect project and the perfect path and the perfect journey to success. But I'm curious if you had any hardships during this process. For example, how did you choose your team? Because I think that one of the main problems sometimes for people to be successful is to actually combine all of these ingredients called people with different personalities and different goals and different egos.
I think you're touching upon something that is extremely important. And when we got together the first times, we discussed these things even before we knew each other, and we discussed how important it is to trust each other, and how important it is to work deeply together and to be able to work in an open environment, because, as you say, things are going to go wrong. Things will go wrong, but you don't know where and how. And it's important to be prepared to meet those setbacks and to mitigate all those problems. If you are blaming each other for who did wrong, if you are not looking for how do we solve the problem, in that case you're going to fail. So it's extremely important. And I remember weeks when we had telephone calls almost every evening, independent what day of the week it was, in order to sort out and find solutions of problems, which could be that an immunoassay that we provided did not work, something else did not work, and it was found that and the clinical settings, the clinical doctors did not work, or something like that. So a number of things that came up during this whole process. Also being able to introduce controls in the system so that you monitor and see where things can go wrong. As an example, we worked with the Karolinska Institute epidemiology department, which is one of the larger in Northern Europe and most competent. And in addition, we also had a consultant for Thermo Fisher to audit that department to say that, okay, are the calculations correctly done, and so on. And the openness, and they provided access to data and so on, which was also essential. The same thing as they had full access to what we were doing within the company.
Yeah, there are many things when it comes to the actual project team. One thing is that you do have to find people in a core team that have complementary skills. But that's just one thing. Another thing that is often forgotten is transparency. You have to be able to be transparent with each other. I can talk about many other things when it comes to project management, but especially when you work between different organizations, such as big companies, academia, small companies, if you can't have an open discussion and things are going to go wrong, if you can't then look forward and say, okay, something went wrong here, together, how do we solve this? It's tricky. So you have to create that kind of environment. And then, of course, you have to set high expectations. Well, you have to start in an area where there's a big unmet need, right? Otherwise, you have to follow up. That's ordinary project management. You have to have somebody who's a boring follow-upper. That's typically me. You have to be able to sell the project to different people, because internally within the organizations. You also have to sell it externally. And you have to find partners that really think this particular project, because it's quite easy. If you come, for example, with an EIT idea, you can get in, let's say, a big company. But if they don't have this as a focus, if they're not really interested, if it's not really in the focus, if they want to do something else, well, then they shouldn't be part of the project. We actually removed one partner in the OncoWatch project because it was obvious they wouldn't be part of what we wanted to do. Once we realized, we contacted them at some point, and then after a couple of months, when we had realized that we got the grant, they had changed the strategy. So why should they be part in the project? We took them out.
I would say that probably one way of teams to work well together, especially if they bring in different kind of skills, would be first to look into the solutions and not the blame, right? Not focus on problems, but once you have a problem, you identify a situation that is not going well, then you must focus on the solution and creating the solution together. Yes. The second one is to work in a transparent environment without being afraid of figuring out that you are wrong. Even if you are a big name, you can still be wrong. So you should not be afraid of being wrong, and people and be completely open for people to look into what you're doing and pointing out your mistakes so you can correct and moving forward. Yeah. Which brings me to conclusion number 3, that I would say that definitely it seems to be that you were a team very goal-oriented.
Yes, and that is also very, very important to have a very clear goal, and this was also set out in the very early beginning of the project to say that what should the end point be? What is an acceptable end point for us, so that we do not change along the way? And because if we say that, okay, yes, we are in the process of reaching that end goal, in that case we can stop doing a lot of other things and so on. So having a fairly clear understanding of the end goal, and here it's important to stress the discussion with a healthcare provider and the treating physicians, and say that if you would have a product that looks like this, would you use it? And what would it take for you to use it? So to actually have that involvement, including then a pretty clear view of, for instance, health economy, of saying that how do I save money in the system? And that is also essential. When you have all of that in place, those clear goals, then you can work towards it, and you can stay out of overdoing things. And not. And we've had some of these discussions. Should we bring in a new biomarker? When someone from the outside comes and say that, oh, I have this extremely good marker, you should include that too. To say that no, it's enough with what we have. We are meeting the primary objective. So we need to finalize the first generation and not try to add on and do the best. We should do what we had set out to do in the beginning.
Good. So focus.
I also think it's important to keep your flexibility. So maybe EIT won't like to hear this, but I try to write as little as possible when it comes to KPIs and deliverables, because I want to reach the deliverables I say I will reach, and the KPIs. And you very easily are asked to add KPIs and add deliverables, but in a long-term project, and these are long-term projects, they're 2 to 3 years, things are going to happen, and you want to have your flexibility. So I keep the deliverables I really know I will reach, and the KPIs, but I also want to have flexibility.
Was the process easy, basically? Was it complex? Was it?
EIT Health is a complex organization from many perspectives, and we got involved in EIT Health as a partner organization, and it ended up in my lap within the company, and I had problems in the beginning to understand how should we deal with what I can call 4 different partners in EIT, which is let's say the citizen, represented by cities and the public. You have the healthcare provider, you have the academic partners, and you have industrial partners. It's 4 very different entities that are working together, and this makes it very complex. Also, the level where you apply and where you engage, that is not like a classical funding application, a research funding application. It's much more close to the market, and it's also to bridge the gap that we have from going from research use only to in vitro diagnostics. And that gap, I think, makes EIT Health unique. However, it has been very difficult to communicate that from an EIT Health standpoint, and it's been difficult for partners to understand how to apply. We engage very heavily, and I personally engaged very heavily in EIT, since I also accepted the role as chairman of the Scandinavian organization and also as a board member in Munich. So I wanted to understand how the process works, and also to contribute how we can actually put this organization to its best utility throughout Europe. And I see EIT Health as being 2 parts. One is actually, I should add, it's probably even 3 parts. One is access to funding and the true applications. Secondly, I think it is access to your partners, and just access to partners and being able to reach out and discuss problems, opportunities, and to get access to each other, I think, is very valuable. What I call the non-monetary value of EIT Health. I think that long term, that is going to be one of the more important aspects of it.
Yes.
The third element, which is also more non-monetary, is that now EIT, the core of EIT, the staff of EIT, is made up to about 100 different people. And they are all very skilled in terms of knowing where do I find information and how can I act within this organization. So reaching out and finding these individuals may make your trip through the system much easier. And I think that getting to know people that can help you is probably a key thing, rather than trying to understand how it all works. Of most importance is, of course, to have a good proposal to start with.
What would be your advice for the partners that want to have a very successful product out there, and they want to be successful in a BP call, EIT Health BP call?
I think you should start where you have a strength or some kind of unique asset. And if you don't have a big unmet need, I wouldn't bother to try to get money. And then I would think about the team. So, for example, in the OncoWatch application, we started OncoWatch in 2019. So it's Karolinska, it's our spin-out company, OncoAlgorithm, and then we have Thermo Fisher. We know we can work with them. We have Philips. Why? Because they have 2 great products for prostate cancer, one scanner and one system for multi-diagnostic conferences. We have Synlab. We've worked with them together.
This is, of course, a very difficult question, and
Yes.
I need to give you a personal answer.
Okay.
And my view of what a good application should entail. One, it should be something that clearly makes a difference in healthcare in a reasonably short-term environment and so in short-term time span. Secondly, it needs to be something that is transferable into other aspects of healthcare, something that is scalable as a concept. If you take, for instance, Stockholm 3, and that is one of the few projects where you start to combine a set of protein biomarkers with a large set of germline genetic markers and clinical information into an algorithm to be able to take a very complex question, a very complex diagnostic package, and package that and introduce it to primary care doctors and patients. So you can take something that is very complex and describe it in very simple terms. That is very easy to scale as a process towards other diagnostic methods, and it is an example where regulatory agencies and where healthcare providers, companies and so on can see a change in how diagnostics is done. So it has not just the edge of saying, okay, we make a better prostate cancer diagnostic test, but we can apply the same process into other fields in healthcare, and basically other fields can learn from how to use algorithms in healthcare.
This was the first episode of InnoStars Talks. In the next episode, we will speak with another inspiring innovator. Stay tuned, subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. This will help me invite guests that you would like to hear from. Also visit our website at eithealth.eu/inyourregion/InnoStars for more information about our new programs, calls for proposals and applications and events. And until the next time.